We are WNST, AM 1570, Taos, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We hope you're setting a spot on your radio dial if you're driving around. I'm astonished by how much traffic there is out on 695 during the holidays. So I hope some of you have AM 1570 on your dial. If you do watch us on YouTube or you find us out on the socials, all of our crab cake tours are brought to you by our friends at the Maryland Lottery. I've been fast and furious with the crab cakes. We were at Fadley's this week. Damie broke out all the shipping stuff and all the stuff that they're doing down there. I had this crab Christmas thing and ornaments and cookies that look like crabs and then we talked about politics a lot. The Democratic National Party had Robbie Leonard down as well as Matt Gallagher. Ruff and Bell joined me from Coppin State. We talked about our partnership with Coppin State and the holidays, and they just won a big ladies game last week against Arizona State. Played NC State pretty tough the other night on the men's side as well. Those games are available at AM 1570 as well. Our friends at Jiffy Lube Multi Care are also sending us out on the road for our crab cake tour. We will be at Amici's on Tuesday. Don't tell anybody they don't have a crab cake there. They don't. But I'm doing the show there anyway because I love them, and it's sort of my Arnold's if this were happy days. And these are all happy days because they're playing the Giants this week. Wednesday, we will be wrapping things up at Costas, established in 1971. I was established in 68. We're looking forward to getting over there. One day I'm going to get Mr. Costas to come on and tell me the whole story about how he came to Dundalk with $5 in his pocket and turn Costas into what it is, which is a place you should be joining us next Wednesday under the Christmas tree. And I'm trying to wrangle friends, neighbors, Dundalkians, and but not Luke Jones because he's going to be too busy swept up in all of this football, Saturday night football, Wednesday night football, Christmas night football, no Sunday football. I'm looking at my Sunday schedule during the holidays and I'm like, I'm going to get some ish done. I would say a normal week out there, Luke, right? Like this extra rest. They're trying to treat it like it's normal. It's a 1 o'clock Sunday game. It'll be the only thing it's normal. The line opened at 15. I don't know where it is right now, but it's a lot. And, you've been out there sort of witnessing this cooling off period for Justin Tucker, the toweling off period of losing and being 2 games behind the Steelers now, and what they're doing defensively on the back end, and just getting ready to look at the reality of the task ahead, as you and I have done, which is this is not an easy path to the Super Bowl for them. And it really, this next 10, 11 days, they got to play great football. They got to be, I don't want to say flawless, but they need to win these games, all of them.
Yeah, I mean, if they have any designs on winning the AFC North, they have to win out. I mean, it's obvious when you're 2 back, and obviously that entails beating the Steelers. That entails the Steelers losing not just one other game, but when you kind of go through. I mean, and you can do this. You can go on ESPN's website, and they have the playoff machine where you can click on all the different scenarios. A lot of the tiebreakers, when you start going through the list beyond head to head. So if the Ravens beat the Steelers, obviously they split. Beyond division record, you start getting into into the weeds of some of those other tiebreakers. A lot of them don't work out in the Ravens' favor. So when you kind of look at this, I don't want to say it's impossible, but you're really looking at the Ravens obviously needing to win out, including beating Pittsburgh in 10 days now, 9 days, whatever it is, and needing Pittsburgh to lose a couple more games beyond that. Now, as I pointed out to you earlier this week, when you look at the Steelers' schedule coming up and knowing that they play Philadelphia, they play Kansas City, they play the Ravens on the road, of course, it's not impossible, but to your point, there's no margin for error here. There's certainly no room, no discussion whatsoever about the Ravens going up to the Meadowlands and not taking care of business there. I mean, if they don't, then shame on them. They're not gonna win the division, and they're going to be talking about barely, at that point, holding on to a wild card spot. So this is tough. To your point, it's a normal week in the sense that you're playing Sunday at 1 o'clock. But you know what follows. You have a short week after that with the Steelers coming to town a week from Saturday, and then you have the Christmas game after that. Going to Houston against the Texans team that hasn't been great, but is still a division leader at this point in time. So it's tough. I mean, it absolutely is. I mean, this first game isn't tough, but knowing what you have on the back end of that, even if it's not a talking point during meetings, you know it's in the back of the minds of the coaching staff to, if you can take care of business and get a lead and build the kind of lead that you should build against a team that has 2 wins on the season and is playing their, what amounts to their third string quarterback at this point in time, and look at their injury report and look at the guys on IR, this is the kind of game, if things go the way that you're capable of playing, you could be able to have the luxury of resting some guys in the fourth quarter, knowing you have a quicker turnaround and then a really quick turnaround after that. So, obviously they need to win, and obviously, hey, this team lost to the Raiders back in week 2, and you see what their record is now. This team lost to the Browns back in week 8. We know where the Browns are record wise. So you can't take anything for granted. You can't make any assumptions, but in an ideal world, that line being what it is, yeah, you'd have the kind of lead in the fourth quarter where you can pull some of your very best guys with 10 minutes to go and start looking ahead to Pittsburgh.
Well, it does set up to be that kind of game. It's 16 now.
Yeah,
So, I mean, went from 15 to
huge.
14 and a half. I mean, it's like second division, European soccer at this point. But, all that being said for this team and how it shapes up for Pittsburgh and having watched Pittsburgh play last week, and as you've pointed out, I don't know that everybody knows this, but certainly Steelers have a really tough schedule, man, including this week. We're going to sit around and watch them play after we're sitting around skating at 3:30 and Lamar's got his hat turned backwards up in New Jersey, right? And they're ordering, cannoli to go, you know. But the Steelers have a tough road as well, and there's some vibe about them being 2 games ahead. And you and I didn't even really talk about this much earlier in the week, but like that they're a paper 2 game lead. That they're not. Russell Wilson's just not the old Russell Wilson, but I don't know. Threw a lot of touchdowns last year, not a lot of interceptions, and got whacked out of there and didn't have a job for 5 or 6 weeks here, and finally worked his way in. And they haven't lost, they don't lose, So it is. It's like looking at Patrick Mahomes and saying, "Well, it's not impressive enough." Well, to your point earlier in the week, Burrow has been pretty impressive as an individual, but that hasn't won him any games in Cincinnati. But Kansas City and, Buffalo wasn't very impressive on the road in LA. They certainly weren't very impressive on the road in Baltimore earlier in the year. And you look at these teams, but Pittsburgh, of all of them, we still sit here and scratch our heads and say, how does Tomlin do it every year? Always above 500, doesn't matter who their quarterback is. And you can go through the trash pail of their quarterbacks. And I probably shall next week with Charlie Batch for the holidays because it makes me feel nice to bring him on. And I think we look at them and say, how are they doing that? And it's not impressive, and they're not beat down victories. But you know what? They don't rack up 12 penalties for 140 yards in a game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What they're doing is different than what they do here. And certainly defensively, Pittsburgh's, the lunch pail packs with that. And that's what they should be worried about next week, because I don't think we're thinking enough about the defense around here and why the 5 losses are the 5 losses. You kick the kicker if you want and, make chicken jokes and do anything you want on that end. But they got 5 losses at this point. They're 2 games back, and it's 2 weeks before Christmas. They're not on schedule,
No,
like you like to say.
no, I mean, no way. I mean, I've written this. We've talked about it on the air. I mean, me, I'm an analytics guy. I've cited DVOA for years now. When we talk about different measures beyond just talking about win-loss record or beyond the traditional counting stats, yards per game, different things like that. But at some point in time, that needs to align with what you're doing when the scoreboard, what the scoreboard looks like when the clock hits triple zeros. And this team hasn't been able to do that. Now, all's not lost. 8-5's not terrible, right? I mean, 8-5 has them comfortably in a wild card spot right now, but that's not inspiring from a standpoint of, we already know the number 1 seed's out of the picture and the first round buys out of the picture. The division's an uphill climb. I mean, depending on which site you want to look at in terms of trying to forecast their odds, they're somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 to 30% to win the division. And that might even be on the kind side when you kind of look at it, albeit acknowledging the Steelers' daunting schedule that they have over the final 4 games as well. But you need to go out and do it. And it's not just one thing. Justin Tucker's a big part of it. He has been. When you consider these close losses and the missed kicks he's had, it's an absolute huge part about it. Just like we've talked about with the defense and the improvement the defense made before the bye week, it absolutely coincided with Marcus Williams being benched. I mean, I'm not saying that's all of it, but it, it doesn't lie. Like your eyes don't lie in that case where you say that was a major part of the problem. And obviously they've done some things scheme wise to simplify and keep things in front of them. They've limited the big plays, but they need to continue that. And I asked Zach Orr and Kyle Hamilton over the last week in terms of, okay, defense played better in Pittsburgh, albeit in a loss. Played well out in LA against the Chargers and even against the Eagles. I think if you were divvying up the blame, okay, the run defense leaked in the fourth quarter against Saquon Barkley, but by and large, you'll take that defensive effort. You know, it was much more the offense and Justin Tucker not doing what they needed to
But
do.
there is a thing about suck it up time in fourth quarter that you got to get off
Sure,
the field. And if you
sure,
can't get
but
off the field in the one score game, how good is your team? You know, I'm at
understood,
home.
but at the
Yeah.
same time, this run defense hasn't been the problem whatsoever this year, right? Saquon Barkley is in the MVP discussion right now. I mean, we're talking about a very special exception there. Now, if I don't think Tyrone Tracy for the Giants is going to run the ball on them with any level like that. But hey,
But
they
you have to
played
stop Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes if you have a touchdown lead on the road on a
sure
cold
or
day in
Pittsburgh.
January. Right. I mean, you're
Yeah,
like, so
but
you're
I
going to have
guess
to stop the beat the best if you're a
right.
defense. You're going to have
But
to show up against that.
no question. But the point I was trying to make in terms of what's next, they've limited the big plays. The pass defense has tightened up. I mean, it absolutely has. It's been much more average to slightly above average at the very least over the last three games they had played before the bye week. And hey, that's coming a long way from where it had been, right? I mean, with what Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase were doing, and even some quarterbacks earlier in the season.
Remind me to ask you about Hamilton off the line of scrimmage in regard to how that's gotten better.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Well,
Yeah.
that's a big part of it. I mean, you don't see him make the same impact splash plays, but his coverage has been really good on the back end, and that's one of the reasons why teams haven't been throwing it over their heads. Darius Washington, same thing with him. But when I asked them what the next step is, Hamilton, he gave a really cerebral answer, and he kind of talked about it through the lens of, you know, we've been playing better, but even in some of those games before the bye, we were really focused on being a little bit softer in coverage and keeping the ball in front of us and not giving up big plays. The next step for us is now, since we've established that and assignments have been cleaned up, communication's been cleaned up, all of that, the next step is to become more of an attacking defense again. And I think a big thing that Zach Orr mentioned about that when I asked him over the bye week was takeaways. I mean, they have 11 takeaways on the season. That's 23rd in the league. Yeah, interestingly enough, I mean, we kind of forget not just that the Ravens led the league in takeaways last year, they were tied with the Giants in takeaways last year, which, you know, makes it ironic that the fact they're facing New York on Sunday. But, you know, that's something they're looking at. I mean, they have 7 interceptions on the season, Nestor. 5 of them are from Marlon Humphrey. So they have 2 picks all year from players not named Marlon Humphrey.
Well, they dropped 5.
And they did. Yeah. And that's part of it, right? And that's part of when you're trying to gauge and judge not what a defense has done to that point in time, but what they're going to do moving forward. That's where you do take
Well, it's
some
also
heart
like saying how many sacks did they have and where they rank, but where are the pressures?
Right,
You
exactly.
know? Yeah.
Exactly. And we've talked about it with the pass rush. The pass rush has been very feast or famine. When it works, it looks great. When it's not so great, it's really
And
hurt
you know
them.
when it works, when the offensive line's lousy, and you know when their offensive line doesn't work, when they have a one-on-one problem. You know, when
Yeah.
somebody can beat you on every play, you're in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. We've talked about it with the Ravens offensive line where it's held up against the more average fronts that they've played, but when they face really good fronts and specifically teams that seem to have good interior defensive linemen, they've really struggled then,
Well,
right?
it exposes your guards.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
we know that their guards are, you know, it's a guy that's been a swing offensive tackle primarily in Patrick McCary and a guy that was a backup right tackle in Daniel Faalele. So yeah, I mean, but to go back to the defense, look, there's nothing about this game on Sunday that's going to earn you league-wide style points. I mean, we're not talking about that, but I do think it's an opportunity for them to take the next step that Kyle Hamilton was talking about in terms of, not just saying, hey, we're going to keep everything in front of us, but can we get back to the point where we're picking our spots where we attack and
You're
we're
playing
trying
a
to
third string quarterback, right?
exactly,
And there's
exactly.
tape. And you're better than them across the board. Vegas says so, everybody says so, right? Like at some point, this has got to be the week you get 3 picks. This has got to be the week you strip a ball. This has got to be a week that Drew Lock is 7 for 24 for 91 yards in
Well, Drew Lock's not
desperation.
playing. It's
Uh,
Tommy DeVito.
Tommy DeVito, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
it's fine.
Even
I struggle to
worse.
keep track of it too.
Yeah, even worse. But
Yeah,
there's less tape on him. But either way,
right.
you should be able to overwhelm an inferior quarterback. And I don't know. I mean, I still think of Roquan Smith as a guy who can wreck a game. I think of Matabike.
Sure.
I look at what they have up front. I look at Marlon Humphrey. I look at Kyle Hamilton in a normal role, safety role, as you would say, and say this attack part of like playing a preseason kind of game with this team, right? It, like 16 points to consider the Giants. That's how bad it is. And I don't know that they're just going to waltz this week. I would like to think that Derrick Henry and Lamar can have some fun this week. That the offensive line, that they can control the ball, get 3 and out, control the ball, get 3 and out. Game's over at 340. They win 31-6. Come home and get ready for the Steelers. That's my dream scenario. I don't know that I would predict that. I mean, the Giants have been relatively scrappy to some degree, despite the fact that they have no quarterback play, which automatically kills you in every circumstance. If you don't have a quarterback that can play, you can't stay 4 quarters with anybody because you can't control the ball. But this feels to me to be that kind of game where, like on Monday morning, I don't want to say we're laughing about it, but we should be feeling really good, come out of it healthy, feeling like this is a confidence boost for Pittsburgh next week. I don't want to see them on the struggle Sunday or have any excuses about why they're struggling or missing kicks. Like, let's go. Let's make it a new season. I'm sure John's pitching that out there. They should come out with some crispness this week, given the bye and all of that, and look like a playoff team. Look like a 9-5 team.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, for me, check boxes, right? Justin Tucker, make all your kicks. Offensive line. Hey, one thing I'll mention about this Giants defense, which is not good overall. They don't have Dexter Lawrence. Ojulari, who was one of the edge rushers that was talked about quite a bit at the trade deadline, he's on IR. But they still have Brian Burns. They still have Kayvon Thibodeau. I mean, and obviously if you took a look at the early week injury report, there are a ton of guys on the injury report for the Giants. But, they do still have some good players here and there. So I want to see a clean performance from the offensive line. I want to see what answers they found there. I'm not anticipating changes there, but hey, you never know, right? I mean, we saw changes back in September when things weren't going great. But yeah, I don't think for me it's necessarily that, I'll feel all warm and fuzzy if they win by 30 points, but some of the things that have been issues or some of the things that have been questions, I don't want those things to look
Dude, if they're
like such
first and
questions.
25 again, I just don't want to see that.
Sure. And look, for as much as we look at the line and we laugh and the Giants are awful, and they are. I mean, this is a team that's talking about getting the first overall pick and taking their next franchise quarterback that they're going to have to replace in 3 years because it probably won't work out because it's the Giants at this point. But it's still an NFL team, and the Ravens should know better than anybody that if you play with your food and you turn the ball over or you commit penalties, which has really been the problem for them offensively in terms of times this year where it hasn't gone as well. They haven't turned the ball over a whole lot, except in the Pittsburgh game. But
What
you do those kind
percentage
of
is
things.
that of punts that they have that
Yeah,
where they have punted or been in fourth down and have to go for it based on penalties? I mean, like, dude, it feels like 6 to 8 possessions a week they've had a penalty somewhere along the line that's effed up the operation.
I mean, it either does or they have to overcome it. And this offense has been so great over the course of the season, generally speaking. Now, not against Philadelphia, of course, not against Pittsburgh, of course, but over the course of the season, think how many times they've scored touchdowns in spite of themselves committing those penalties and having to overcome those types of things. So yeah, you want to clean those things up. It's not. This is not going to be a raucous environment. Probably a decent chance there's going to be as many Ravens fans as Giants fans there on Sunday, if
By
people
the
want to
way, if
brave the
Tucker makes a
cold. But
couple of kicks and they're 10-2, the penalties get like sanitized, right? Like all the
sure,
sins go away, and we're talking about it because they're 8-5, but it really it's made everything harder. Like,
it
and
has.
it doesn't stop. If in the first quarter, if by 120, I'm tweeting or blue skying or fate, what the hell I'm doing out in the social media about penalties, they and that's the problem. We're in December and they want to win a championship and they have 5 losses. And we sit here and point out all the pimples
Yeah,
because they're not pimples now. They might be warts. They might
they
need
might.
surgery, not, like a little bit of the white cream.
Well, again, you have to clean those things out up. But yeah, I mean, Justin Tucker at this point, even if he goes 3 for 3 against the Giants, does it mean he's fixed? Does that mean your confidence level is going to be where you'd like it to be if they need to make a kick to beat Pittsburgh or they need to make a kick to beat the Texans on Christmas, or forget about those games. If they're on the road in Buffalo or on the road in Pittsburgh or on the road in Houston in January playing in a playoff game. So look, there's nothing that's fixing that confidence level other than Justin Tucker making every kick the rest of the season, right? And looking like Justin Tucker next year too. So you have that. The O line, I mean, look, and I saw lots of discourse about this with film study type Twitter, people who fans who watch the game and some that are quite good in breaking down film and people that I follow and say, hey, I value your opinions. At this point, do they think Ben Cleveland's any better than Falele or McCary? I mean, there's 3.5 years now of evidence that suggests the Ravens don't believe that, right? When it comes to Ben Cleveland, same with Voorhees, compared to McCary. I mean, if we see a change, we'll talk about it, but I'm not anticipating that until we see it. So, but with the O line, I mean, it's the same thing. They've looked good against lesser units, lesser defensive fronts. But when they've had their issues, it's looked really bad, right? I mean, there's no middle ground. It either looks good against lesser competition, or it's looked bad and sometimes really bad against your more elite fronts. And the problem with that is not that every playoff team is going to be that, but Pittsburgh, elite defensive front. Kansas City has Chris Jones, even if their defense collectively hasn't been quite as strong over the second half of the season. Buffalo, the Ravens did impressive work against them back in week 4, but Buffalo has gotten healthier, with getting some guys back, and we'll see. I mean, obviously the
And the
Rams.
game will be there.
Right, sure, sure. So there's always that, right? And we always try to do this, right? We always try to say,
And it'll
well,
be cold there.
yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with with Ravens Steelers or any of these rivalry games where you say, okay, well, this happened in this game. That doesn't mean it's going to happen again, right? It could be the exact opposite. So I mean, there again, there's not going to be anything that happens in this game that I think is going to drastically change anyone's opinion unless it's something very negative, right? Unless it's something, if Justin Tucker goes 0 for 3 and it's windy up, and then you're saying, okay, they've got to bring in someone on the practice squad and look at this because coming out of the bye, it's not any better, right? Heaven forbid you get an injury or two because you look at their injury report right now beyond the Deontay Johnson suspension. I mean, it's Sanusi Kane is the only player not practicing this week, rookie backup safety. So they're as healthy as you could dream of being in mid-December at this point in time. Michael Pierce should be back on Sunday. He's practicing fully. I would think he'll get activated for this game, I would assume. So they're as healthy as you could fathom. Back in December when
Windy mid 30s, by the way, just so you know,
there you
windy
go.
mid 30s at the Meadowlands on
Yeah,
Sunday.
so Justin Tucker, hey, be ready. I mean, this is the kind of environment you're going to be kicking in January if you're still the Ravens kicker at that point. So, I mean, he knows that. But yeah, you look at this team from a health standpoint. Back in May when the schedule came out and knowing they had a week 14 bye, I mean, they couldn't have dreamed any better in terms of what their health is right now. I mean, you really couldn't. So that's where, again, bad turf at MetLife, holding your breath, making sure you don't get, you don't have someone that turns an ankle the wrong way or their knee goes the wrong way, right? I mean, it's the last thing you want, but that's no different than anyone else, right? I mean, that's the league, right? I mean, you're trying to stay as healthy as possible. I mean, ask the 49ers who are injured again and they're on their way to missing the playoffs the way it's looking, barring a dramatic turnaround here. So, you know, this is one of those games where it kind of feels like there's not a whole lot you can take away from it other than just win the game first and foremost, and just check some of a few of those boxes as we mentioned. And then like I said, if you can play a clean enough game and an impressive enough game where you can be in a position with 10 minutes to go and say, hey, let's get Lamar out of there. Let's get Derrick Henry out of there. Let's get Roquan Smith and Marlon Humphrey out of there. You can't rest everybody, of course, but you can try to do that. But look, unlike last year, unlike some of their recent teams, even some of the years where they didn't necessarily weren't necessarily the number one seed. Go and look at the last 5, 6 years. I mean, the Ravens have had a lot of blowouts, and we talked about that. I mean, we're not talking about the NFC thing this week because they're coming off of a loss against an NFC team, but we know that that's
Well,
been
you can
there.
go back and see how many tweets I've had saying, "Why is Lamar in there?" You know what I mean? Like
Sure,
once it
sure,
gets to be
but
21, 24, 28, I don't know what that math is, but this better be one of those games where we're thinking about that, at least hoping
yeah,
for that.
but that said, they've only had a couple of those games this year, right? I mean, last year you go back and find 4, 5, 6 games. 2019, famously, right? RG3 played a lot that year because Lamar was benched in fourth quarters because they were blowing
Well, they
people out.
haven't
So,
boat race teams because their defense haven't been any good.
well, that they've missed kicks, they've committed penalties, right? I mean, it's the same issues that crop up that turn some of these games that could have been blowouts into games where, not that the outcome is in danger. Like Tampa Bay is a perfect example, right? Remember, second half, they really jumped out to a big enough lead in that game where you exhaled, but they committed a turnover that, like what that weird lateral play that happened, and their defense didn't tackle very well late in the game, and some penalties, some big plays, all that. And before you know it, it was a 10-point game again late to the point where you couldn't pull your starters and everything. So they've had some of that. So yeah, I mean, look, on paper, even if both these teams were at full strength, and the Giants at this point are nowhere close to full strength, Ravens are much better than them from a talent level standpoint. But we've said that about some other games this year where it was kind of
Oakland,
tight. Yeah,
Las Vegas,
yeah, Las
whatever they're called.
Vegas. I mean, Cleveland. Look at that game. I mean, there was another game where they catch the ball a couple times on defense. Not only do they win the game, but you're having a much different idea and perception of what the defense was in that game because the fact that Jameis Winston threw it to them, 3 different times and they dropped it, including Kyle Hamilton, the play before the game winner. So, it's just there's been a lot of that this year. So I think that's where you're hoping, and this is where I get a little psychological, a little bit of the mental side of this. You're hoping that the bye week was good for them from a standpoint of taking a long look at themselves and saying, hey, what do we want to be? Right? I mean, we're 8-5. That's good. It's not great, but it's good. But do we want to be better than that? Are we going to be the team that can make a run and play deep into January and get to New Orleans, play in the Super Bowl? To your point, when you look at Kansas City and Buffalo and Pittsburgh and Houston and all these teams that are going to be in this AFC playoff field, they all have something about them that you don't love, right? They all have something that isn't as impressive or something that could be a potential pitfall. I mean, it's the NFL. I mean, you rarely have a team that's a juggernaut, right? I mean, the Ravens came close to that at the end of the regular season last year in terms of how they were perceived, and we saw how that turned out. So, they've got to put it all together now. Guys have talked about it these last couple weeks where for most of the year, it was the offense leading the way. Special teams have been a problem all year, not just Justin Tucker, but other elements of the special teams. And the defense, while it came on in the 3 games before the bye, we know that how much of a problem the pass defense has been. So it's crunch time now. It's time to start putting all that together. Not that you're going to play a perfect game every week, but they certainly need to play more complete football to not just navigate this upcoming stretch of 3 games in 11 days, but to optimize themselves in terms of making a run in January, knowing that most likely you're going to be playing most of it, if not all of it, on the road. So, I mean, it's where they are right now. And I'm not going to sit here and say they can't do it, but the time is now to start doing it, right? I mean, it's not, go 2-2 over these final four and continue to have the same issues, and then miraculously you think it's going to start happening for you in the wild card round. You need to start showing that now. You've got 4 games to, it's a new season, but you need to think about it in terms of, no, you don't have 4 games to go, you have 8 games to go. But you need to start thinking about it in terms of, hey, if you want to be the division champion, got to win 8 in a row here. I mean, it's that's your mindset. If you want to be Super Bowl champion, you got to win 8 in a row here because you want to at least try to have a first round game at home if you can. So it's not
Well, the
truly.
question is, are they capable of being that good? They have the best quarterback on the planet, allegedly. They have a running back going to the Hall of Fame. They have wide receivers who are better than at any point that they've had.
Sure.
They have a defense that's highly paid with 3 levels of players that are
Talented
Pro Bowl
players.
talented players. Some issues at Will and Sam. They have some deficiencies, and certainly the safety position has been a mess for them. The
Mhm.
kicker is good enough. He can kick the ball
Hope.
63 yards if they need to. What?
I said you hope. I mean, I agree with you, but he's got to do it, right? I mean, he's got to do it.
No, but saying how do they win 8 games in a row and win a
Sure.
Super Bowl? I'm trying to make the case here. I'm trying to be, Nestor Sunshine and pretend that I think that they can go to Pittsburgh, Buffalo, and Kansas City in that order and win. I don't think they can do that as comprised. I've seen nothing to believe that is possible on this team or the makeup of any of these guys like Marlon Humphrey and these guys that haven't, and Lamar, all of them who collectively in January have been a part of.
Yeah.
I stood at their lockers back when I was a real reporter before they threw me out. Now I'm not even allowed to do that when the
Yeah.
season ends and look them in the eyes and see what's going on. I don't know. They're 8-5. There's no real reason to like them to win the Super Bowl right now. But if you do, I bet you get hell of an odd right now, right? Like get a nice little number on them because they've been backed up so much. But they have the elements of
Yeah.
being able to be the team that I just dreamed of you. That Derrick Henry can walk in any week and beat your ass. So can Lamar.
Well,
So when that happens, and as long as the defense can buckle up, take the ball away once, and get off the field, not just get pushed around. Maybe Buffalo could push him around. I don't know that Kansas City offensively can push him around, but there's some magic trick with Mahomes and Allen, and especially at home on a nasty night. I mean, our fans won't be in those buildings because the tickets will be $600. Like so, Ravens fans aren't taking over Buffalo or Kansas City. I promise you. The way the Eagles fans came in here last week and brought their cheesesteaks and had a good time and beat our ass. So it won't be the case. But I can make a case for them winning 8 in a row. And the reason I'll make a case for them winning 8 in a row is come see me on Christmas night when we're sitting here having dessert and maybe they've won 3 in a row.
hmm
But I mean, we're talking 10, 12 days from now, right? Like
not long.
maybe
Yeah.
they've won 3 in a row. And maybe it's the Harbaugh way, not pretty. Maybe the Pittsburgh thing, they get a cheap call. Who knows? Doesn't matter how they win. But if on Christmas night they've gone down to Houston, and you've given me precedent, they already gone to Tampa and won. They beat the hell out of Buffalo here. I mean, they're good enough.
hmm
They're good enough. They are. They're better than 8-5. And if I were to go out there and Harbaugh were to invite me out there to do some Mickey Coachella comedy, I'd look at all of them and say, 8-5. Hell's wrong with you guys? You should be ashamed of this. It's terrible, 8-5. Now we're gonna have to go on the road, and Jones and Aparicio are over there saying we can't do it. Oh, I can. I can see John getting all. But give him my love. Tell him happy holidays. You see him this week. But they can win 8 in a row. I'm not. I mean, they're talented enough to do that. This isn't Anthony Wright running around or Kyle Bowler or
They're
Steve
healthy.
McNair on one. Keep going,
They're very
So
healthy. Right.
if we're going to play Ravens Roost here and rah 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 and take over the lounge and be all sunshine and roses around here, so I can get my press pass back because that would help. They can win. I mean, they can, and I'd write that. I'd say that out loud. But then if you're going to be that team that's going to win 8 in a row, be the team that wins 4 in a row. Be the team that beats Pittsburgh next week no matter what. Be the team that goes down to Houston on short rest, all banged up, tired, handles your business, and then comes back and talks about closing things out with Cleveland and how Pittsburgh's going to stumble and you're going to get a home game. I don't know, but the momentum needs to change in that direction. And the thing that changes the momentum is winning 4 games in a row,
Yeah.
to your point.
Well, and you do that by being more consistent, becoming a more consistent football team, putting it all together. Not that it's going to be perfect. I mean, you rarely play a perfect game, especially not going to do that 3 or 4 weeks in a row, but look more complete. The offense get back on track after choppy performances 2 of the last 3, right? Which led to 2 losses, right? Justin Tucker has to make kicks, special teams, clean things up. I mean, come on. You're the Ravens. You're that team that thinks about special teams, whereas you have some of these other teams around the league who you don't really feel like they necessarily put a lot of effort into it. The Ravens do. So for it to be as bad as it's been, beyond Tucker, not just Tucker, but all of it, not good enough defensively.
John Fossil will be available. Let's bring him in. Let's Bones.
Yeah,
Let's go Bones.
man, that Monday night. Hearing them talk about Leon Lett and everything, I was just like, man, just the latest thing to go wrong for the Cowboys, which I'm not shedding any tears for, mind you. But defensively, okay, you took some encouraging steps the last 3 games before the bye. Now come out on the other side. You're healthy. You're getting Michael Pierce back now. Put it all together. Attack. Get a couple turnovers. Take the ball away a little bit more. Your pass rush, Kyle Van Noy will be back after missing the Eagles game. Look to be a little more consistent there. It's not going to be the 2000 Ravens. It doesn't need to be. I mean, as great as this offense is when it's playing its best football, and it did that for most of the first 10 or 11 weeks of the season, right? I mean, we saw it. You look at their numbers; they're still right there at the top of the leaderboard, or second, third, something like that, almost across the board. Even with an underwhelming finish, pre-bye. But you look at that. Can they put it all together? Can they stay healthy? Can they get some bounces going their way? To your point, I mean that's always part of it. 2000. Look at some of the things that happened in that playoff run. Look at 2012 with the Mile High Miracle, and so you always have that, right? Luck's always part of it. People are offended by when you bring up luck when it talks.
I wrote about it in Purple Rain too.
It absolutely is part of it
because every person in the building mentioned it in the aftermath. Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, I mean,
Jacoby Jones, dude, stop. You know what I mean? Like
exactly. So
I mean, Jacoby Jones catching that ball is going to put John Harbaugh in the Hall of Fame. I mean,
right.
Like literally.
Well, and think about it. I mean, look at some of their losses this year. I mean, some self-destructive things happen, yes, but some unlucky things happen too. I mean, think about the interception Lamar threw in Pittsburgh on the play. The linebacker made an unbelievable play on that, to take it away from Justice Hill. I mean, if that were a Ravens player that did that, we wouldn't be talking about it in terms of, Russell Wilson threw a bad pick there or anything. We'd say that was an unbelievable play by Roquan Smith or whoever you want to imagine taking the credit for it. So things like that happens. The other team tries to. We know that as well. But yeah, this is the time because, look, I don't care about Lamar winning an MVP. I don't care about how many guys get sent to the Pro Bowl. I think I know you and I are because we've talked about it for years now, but I think so many fans are they're over the regular season stuff. That's why them not being the number 1 seed, I'm just like, okay, hey, it's going to be a more difficult path, but maybe this is what this team needs to do to be the underdog where not everyone's expecting you to do it. And you go and do it. And I've said to you, the 2012 team in mid-December, same time, at 12 years ago, at this point in time, Joe Flacco was laying on the turf and the Ravens were getting their butts beat by the Denver Broncos. And they had just fired Cam Cameron. And we were wondering if Jim Caldwell, who'd never called plays before as a coordinator, they were a mess. I perceive this team much better right now than where we perceive that team at that moment in time. But that's also making some assumptions that you need Justin Tucker to get right. You need your defense to continue that improvement that they made before the bye week. You need your offensive line to come up with some answers, knowing that you're going to see Pittsburgh at least one more time, if not 2 more times. You're going to see Kansas City in January, presumably, if you're wanting to get to where you want to go. So you know, you're going to face those teams. So, and that shouldn't be viewed as a negative. That's an opportunity for you because those teams have to face you again. And though, it's not as though they've been blown out by anyone, right? I mean, it's not like they've lost these games by, these games they've lost by a little bit here or there. So make two or three more plays over the course of a game. Make your kicks. Catch a ball if the quarterback throws it to you. If you're on defense, don't commit penalties. Line up properly. On special teams, know your assignment. Don't commit penalties. So look, I mean, again, Buffalo's having these same types of conversations. Kansas City, despite the fact that they have one loss, all kinds of discussions because we know that they haven't looked dominant, right? They haven't looked like what you would expect a 12-1 team to look like.
Well,
I mean,
that's the Steelers. The Steelers aren't dominating
same with
anybody.
the Steelers,
They're
right?
just going to win.
And I don't say that to be disparaging to them. I'm saying that because like everyone's kind of in the same boat where it's all about not just winning the next game, but knowing that, hey, it's time to go on a run here. It's time to do this.
Well,
That's
I can
why,
hear Mike Tomlin saying we're not good enough to be cocky. We're not good enough to
sure.
be thinking we're just going to come in and we're not 16-point favorites in places we go because our hotsy-totsy offense,
Yeah.
and the Ravens have to go out and be hotsy-totsy, and they want to win a Super Bowl. They've picked the hardest path they can pick at this point. And having to really slobber knocker down and play the Steelers, not just hard next week, win. Like they lose to the Steelers,
Then
now
it's
you
wild
go into
card.
the toilet
Yeah.
and you're gonna be going to Buffalo week one.
Yeah.
Right? So,
Yeah.
Luke, I'll give you final shot here, parting shots, as they would say on the sports reporters.
Yeah. I mean, let's just bring it full circle. I mean, it's the Giants on Sunday, right? I mean, we'll have plenty of time to talk about these other games, but they got to go handle their business and do it in a way that if you can get to the point where you're thinking about being able to pull a few guys here and there in the last 10, 11 minutes of the game, I think that would be huge for them, right? I mean, Pittsburgh, short week. The Steelers are in their heads. We know that. They can say they aren't, but they've beaten them 8 of the last 9 times. They absolutely are in their heads. So but you got to take care of business here. Don't kick the ball around. Don't play with your food. Don't commit penalties. If Tommy DeVito throws you the football, catch it. Justin Tucker, make your kicks. Please. I'm so tired of talking about that, but we have to because it's a very real problem for them. So, this is the game that, like I said, it's not going to be a headliner game. Even if they win by 40 points, what's the first thing that anyone else is going to say around the league? Oh, well, they beat up on the lousy Giants, who are woeful. But it's a game where they can check some boxes, feel better about themselves coming out of the bye, knowing that they had lost 2 out of 3. And then after that, it's, hey, not even a 24-hour rule. You'll have the couple hours coming back from northern New Jersey back to Baltimore. You'll enjoy it then, and then right away it's getting ready for Pittsburgh because you got a Saturday game. So just take care of business on Sunday. You'd like it to be comfortable, but it's also the NFL. And I'd say this much, you know me, I'm not a gambling man. I'm not touching that line when you're talking about a road team in the NFL that's favored by more than 2 touchdowns. I'll just pass on that game. Give me something else to
Well,
some
and the
action,
thing that makes it close is the Ravens doing sloppy stuff. So
which they tend to do.
Here we go. Luke Jones is at Baltimore Luke. He is Luke at WNST.net. You can find me, Ness, at BaltimorePositive.com as well. Our friends at the Maryland Lottery have us out on the road twice next week. So nice. We had to do it twice. We're going to be at Amici's on Tuesday. We're going to be at Costas on Wednesday. Also, our friends at Jiffy Lube Multi-Care putting us out on the road and making things good going into 2025. We got a lot of football here ahead. We've had great crab cake tour conversations. You will find all of them out at Baltimore Positive, as well as I've unearthed this week. I unearthed ZZ Top, an old interview earlier this week, and I'm unearthing various things and cleaning things up for Music Classic during the holidays as well. So we hope to see everybody out, and come get a scratch off from me from the Maryland Lottery. Luke and I'll be monitoring all things football out on all the socials on Sunday beginning at 1 o'clock, and gathering back here again for Monday morning. I am Nestor. He is Luke. We are WNST AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. Wear something warm if you're going to the game in New Jersey. It'll be blustery.